Lane Kiffin has his next star running back in Kewan Lacy. You paying attention yet?
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Locked On Ole Miss podcast is the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's show, we break down the Ole Miss running back room. While all the attention is on Logan Diggs or Shakai Mills-Knight, the name you need to watch is Kewan Lacy. He might just be the best of the bunch. So good, in fact, that Ole Miss took his commitment even at the cost of losing Justice Haynes. And guess what? The Rebels are completely okay with that trade. Why? Because he's really good. Plus, linebacker Suntarine Perkins earned a spot on ESPN's way too early All-American team, the first of many accolades that are likely coming his way this year. And in hoops, Ole Miss heads down to Red Stick for a critical matchup against LSU in a pivotal SEC stretch. We're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you very much for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is. For a second listen, check out Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy for more takes on college football, the SEC, and yes, even Ole Miss. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. So, it's interesting when everybody was looking at the transfer portal and recruiting, and we just finished the fall or winter recruiting cycle, and the roster is about 95% done. One of the things that was just a given was the running back room with Shakai Mills-Knight. Everybody talks about him. He was a Navy All-American player. He is somebody at the Baylor School out of Chattanooga. He's 6 foot, 225 pounds, and honestly, he compares favorably to Quinshon Judkins. And Ole Miss has Logan Diggs coming back, and he flashed a little bit in the Gator Bowl. He's somebody to pay attention to running the football for Ole Miss, and I like him a lot. But the player that Ole Miss recruited that has the most potential for a star turn is probably Kewan Lacy. And let me explain why. He was the guy that the staff was completely all in on for multiple years out of Lawrence, Texas. Multiple years. Ole Miss was all over him. They thought they were going to get him, and then Mizzou pulled a weird NIL deal that got his signature on signing day. We're not exactly how it happened. We're not exactly sure what happened, but we just know that he didn't end up at Ole Miss. And Ole Miss really liked him. I mean, Kevin Smith and Lane Kiffin, they were all in on this running back. So he goes to Mizzou. Ole Miss moves on to the next one. They start recruiting Shakai Mills-Knight. In this year's class, they were looking for transfer portal athletes to be the senior type running back in this class. I honestly believe that's why they signed Logan Diggs to begin with, is so he can lead the running back room in 2025. So Shakai Mills-Knight, he's the young one. He's the pup. He's the one you're not exactly sure how he's going to be, although you can assume that he's going to be very good. And then you have the veteran presence of Logan Diggs, who has the pedigree of being pretty good. But neither one of them necessarily can be counted on to be a star. Ole Miss needs a star. Ole Miss needs to find their Zach Evans if one of these two backs are going to be Quinshon Judkins. If they're going to run back 2022 till the running game is going to be a big piece of it, you need to find a star. And the star that Ole Miss found was Kewan Lacy. When he was in high school, it was absolutely nuts. It was a man playing with boys at the high school level. And this is 6A football in Texas going on. This isn't Baldwin High School. All apologies to Baldwin, or as my dad used to say, Bogachita High School. This is Lancaster, Texas, a 6A school in Texas. This year, after Lacy went to Missouri, they slipped to 4-7 or 5-7 or something like that. Lacy was a big piece of the Lancaster High School offense, and definitely not worth just shaking a stick at, basically. But the one thing that everybody needs to realize, and the reason I am so high, and if you are an everyday or an insider and listen to this show, for more than a year, you know how high I am on Kewan Lacy. I did 2 or 3 shows on him during his recruitment because he's such a good running back. But this is the thing that you need to understand. Just because something doesn't work out or they go somewhere and they transfer away, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with the player. You see that all the time. Oh, it didn't work out there. He's obviously not a good player. And that comes from the recruiting rankings, like the Rivals and the 247 and the On3. Those guys, they've kind of ruined college football evaluation for everybody because they've established a set of one rankings to where there's the 250 best players in the country. And I get it. Americans love lists. Lists are guaranteed content. But it is not just one list of players. There's the reason the service academies are so good, and that is because they run an offense that requires a different type of player than other teams need. So just because he didn't start at Missouri, and I have theories, and I'll talk about that in just a second, that doesn't mean he's not going to be good at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is in a predominantly inside zone running team. And what you just saw on the screen was him potentially running a lot of inside zone plays. Missouri runs that Appalachian State stretch outside zone. They are really good. It's one of the reasons Cody Schrader was so good at Missouri in 2023. He was an expert at that one cut outside zone like Terrell Davis was back in the heyday with the Denver Broncos. That isn't necessarily Kewan Lacy's game. Now, he could have gotten there. He has the tools to get there, but he probably had a little bit of an adjustment. That, in turn, with pass protection, that kept him off the field over the course of the season. Now, I did play in 6 games at Missouri, and he ended up rushing 23 times for 4 yards, a little over 4 yards per carry, 4.5. He had 1 carry against Mississippi State for 6 yards, 3 carries against South Carolina for 12 yards. That's 4 yards a carry. Had a reception in that game, which you're seeing right here on this picture as well, for 12 yards. He had 1 carry for 1 yard against Auburn, 7 carries for 16 against UMass, and 1 catch for -3. Against Buffalo, 6 for 27. Against Murray State, 5 for 42. So that is what he did at Missouri. Like I said, when you look at the PFF grades on him and how it shook out, you can see the numbers varying, but you also see it towards the bottom of the season really start to improve and get better, where he was kind of starting to get it. Now, Missouri had a couple of really upperclassmen transfer running backs that kept Lacy off the field. His pass protection was not good, according to PFF, a year ago. But understand that if he gets his pass protection ready to go, and he's got all spring to figure it out and a lot going on, he has a chance to be a real dude. You saw him on the highlights and his running ability. You saw a lot of what he could bring to the table. And I tell you what, he is my surprise pick in the transfer portal class. Other players that I think could surprise, I think Caleb Odom could surprise for the same reason that I think Kewan Lacy would. They absolutely loved him. They recruited him for multiple years, and just at the last second, he ended up going to Alabama instead of Ole Miss. Now he's at Ole Miss. Ole Miss has corrected the mistakes. One thing also to remember, if there was a big name recruit from the state of Mississippi that Ole Miss was in on that you happened to sign over Ole Miss, just remember, after 1 year, it could all change, whether it's Deuce Knight in Auburn or something like that. So we'll see exactly how it goes. That linebacker at Mississippi State, he could very well end up at Ole Miss as well. So don't give up. Signing day is just like basically a commitment at this point. You still have 9 opportunities after that signing day to sign that player. And Ole Miss is very, very good at doing it. But the surprise, I think, that Kewan Lacy has a chance to be the next star running back for Ole Miss. The kid has everything. And as long as he keeps his head on straight, puts his head down, learns the offense and what Ole Miss needs to do, he has the vision, the lateral movement, the speed, the quickness, everything you would want of a running back. And you saw in the highlights exactly why Kevin Smith and Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. are so in love with this running back. He has a chance to be really special, and he would have had a chance to be a special if he came last year as well. Just because he signed with Missouri, that doesn't take away the ability and the potential of this running back. Spring's going to be so huge for him because Ole Miss is going to do their kinder, gentler spring again, probably, likely. And because of that, that means that Kewan Lacy has a chance to get a lot of carries. Now, Kedrick Reesano was in this position last year, and for whatever reason, he didn't make the grade. Ended up going to Arizona. I think Kewan Lacy might be in that position. He needs to be ready to go by the time spring football starts. So it should be really interesting for the Rebels. Accolades are rolling in for Suntarine Perkins. Could this be an SEC Defensive Player of the Year type season? We break down his impact and the accolade up next. Stay tuned. You know, the big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions of winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less than at least two players. If you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's it. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard for you to win. Example, this week, pair that with one more correct pick and you are cashing out. So this week I am looking at the board and selecting more for Travis Kelce on receiving yards and more for Jalen Hurts on passing yards. I don't know why I feel that. Maybe it's the A.J. Brown angle that I'm rooting for. What I love the most, though, fast, safe withdrawals when I win. My cash is in the account in as little as 15 minutes. Check out the promos tab, by the way, to tell any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tell a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can split a $1 million prize in promo funds. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word, for $50 instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So Suntarine Perkins, we did a show, it might have been early in the week, it might have been last week, about him potentially stepping forward to be the SEC Player of the Year type player that Ole Miss expects him honestly to be. And he's starting to get accolades. ESPN's way too early on top 25 and way too early on All-American list came out. And Suntarine Perkins, it says, few defenders will be more valuable to their teams in 2025 than Perkins, who is an edge rusher / defensive end / outside linebacker, all wrapped up into one. A 5-star recruit, Perkins keeps getting better and better as he enters his junior season. He's undersized at 215 pounds, but is a dynamo when it comes to making big plays. He's tied for the team lead last year in sacks with 10.5 and tackles for loss at 14. He's also the leading returning sacks and tackles for loss man in the Southeastern Conference. Perkins had shoulder surgery in January. Nothing necessarily to worry about there, but he's expected back in time for the season. Going to be very, very big. Remember, Suntarine Perkins, 14 TFLs, 10.5 sacks. He made a run at the Ole Miss sack record last season as a sophomore. He was all over the field. He is the type player that when you play against Ole Miss, there looks like there's 3 of them on the field. It looks like there's number 4s everywhere, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. Pete Golding did a wonderful job of scheming him up in different ways to where didn't necessarily know where he was. And because of that, he was able to get free. Now, a lot of that has to do, and Ole Miss's success, a lot of it's going to have to do this year with the defensive line. Now, Ole Miss has some talent on the defensive line. They have a chance to be pretty good, but it's all unknown talent at the moment. Xavion Harris, we know a little bit about him. We know what we can expect there. He's going to be a monster nose guard in the middle of the defense. He's going to be big. But who's going to be the player next to it? Is it going to be Jam Brown, who is a freshman All-American player? Is it going to be William Eccles, who was a midseason freshman All-American player? There's a lot of guys there. And then you have the 2023 recruiting class or 2024 recruiting class where Jeffrey Rush and Cam Beavers and all of those, they got added with Cam Franklin on the defensive line. This is their time to shine. Their effectiveness is going to determine whether or not Suntarine Perkins is just a great defensive player and just a headache for the other teams and an elite Will Anderson level player. It is going to be on that defensive line. We've talked all the time about that defensive line needing to soak up double teams. You need multiple double teams on that defensive line. You need Xavier Harris to demand one every single snap. You need William Eccles or Jam Brown, whoever it is, to demand one every single snap. So Deshaun Womack or Cam Franklin or Prince William, whoever is playing at the other end, defensive end, opposite of Suntarine Perkins, can wreak a little bit of havoc. Ole Miss led the country last season in sacks and tackles for loss, and a lot of it had to do with that defensive line and giving them the freedom of players to move around. Suntarine Perkins, Chris Paul, TJ Daugherty, those guys were the beneficiaries. So whenever that situation comes in and you look at the defense, if Ole Miss can create something similar to that, doesn't have to be exact, Pete Golding is an explosive defense caller. He wants you to go from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 12, like, all defensive coordinators, but he dials stuff up. He's not based on turnovers. He's really designed on long yardage with the way this team is coached. And because of that, it really helps that linebacker can free flow. Last season, Chris Paul got the benefit of a lot of A-gap blitz. You saw the Zach Arnett linebacker whisper, the effect on this player. So we'll see whenever it comes back in with Pete Golding being the ace in that linebacker room and then Suntarine Perkins kind of moving all around. Ole Miss has the potential, and the key word is potential. So we're going to tell a lot of stories over the next 8 months. But the key word is potential. Ole Miss has a chance to be very, very good next season. Like 10 wins, college football playoff good. They do. They have the talent to do that. They brought in 22 four-star players this last recruiting class. This roster is a talented roster, but it is an unproven roster. It is a roster that a lot of learning is going to happen. The leaders on this team, the Suntarine Perkins, the Bryson Sanders is honestly in his 3rd years in the system. Caden Lee, those guys are going to be big influences on Ole Miss next season. Because, listen, the one thing that we need to honestly as a fan base worry about, we don't know. I have all the faith in Austin Simmons to get everything done. But last season, there was no question this was Jackson Dart's team. Whenever he left, there's naturally going to be a little bit of a leadership vacuum, especially when you move up and have a redshirt sophomore getting ready to take over the job. Like I said, I have faith that Austin Simmons is going to be able to do that. And once he gets on the field and starts practicing every single rep, he's going to be more and more of a leader on this team. But the youth and what Ole Miss had to replace, that will be interesting. I've said multiple times on this show, the thing that the transfer portal does, it provides more volatility, more yo-yo-ness in your team. And Lane Kiffin has done a really good job of not riding that roller coaster. Florida State last year went from 12-0 and undefeated to 2-10. They rode the roller coaster. So I think Ole Miss has the potential to be pretty good. But in the transfer portal, if Ole Miss doesn't hit on Jalen Braxton, if Ole Miss doesn't hit on Sage Ryan, if they can't find that running back option, if the wide receiver room is just so-so, if Austin Simmons has a learning curve, that could affect everything. Potential on this team is absolutely through the roof. And especially if Caleb Odom and Kewan Lacy hit. If they hit, it'll be interesting. It's going to get interesting really, really quickly if Caleb Odom and Kewan Lacy hit immediately. Those are two players that are going to be basically people that Austin Simmons leads on. And then the tight ends that they have that can make the offense very dynamic and very effective. But I went off on a little bit of tangent about Ole Miss's roster moving into next season and expectations, but a lot of that has to do with Suntarine Perkins and the accolades that are going to roll in for him. He's going to be a unanimous first-team All-SEC player. He's going to make All-American rosters going into the season. He's going to be on Butkus Award watch lists. He's going to be the face of the Ole Miss program in 2025, and he should be. He is that good of a football player. I mean, anytime you are tasked like, hey, go spy Jalen Milroe, you are good. You can go. So we'll see exactly how it looks for Suntarine Perkins and this Ole Miss roster. Like I said, there's a lot of volatility of where this team can be. I do not think the floor is below 8-4, though. I do not think that you're going to have like no Florida State type season, but this team absolutely is good enough to do what Tennessee did a year ago. So we'll see exactly how it goes for Ole Miss. Ole Miss heads to Baton Rouge to face LSU, kicking off a crucial stretch of games. Can the Rebels handle the Tigers in the PMAC? We break it all down. Stay tuned. You know, Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, and endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field. The app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, yeah, that's icing on the cake. So download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. So let's change gears a little bit and move over to basketball. Tomorrow, Ole Miss heads down to Red Stick to take on the LSU Tigers, and I am interested to see exactly how Ole Miss responds after that Kentucky game, because my goodness, Ole Miss responded well in that Kentucky game. They shot lights out. They played suffocating defense. I talked to Tim Thomas earlier in the week, and he agreed with me. That's the best half of basketball in the first half that I had ever seen. Ole Miss scored 54 points in that first half. They had a 23-point lead over Kentucky. This wasn't a non-conference game in the fall. This was Kentucky. Ole Miss, if they beat Kentucky 95 more times in a row, they would just be tied in the series. So pardon Ole Miss fans if they take that at a little bit higher level of what's going on. So it's going to be important to see how Ole Miss reacts in this game. So the keys to victory, be able to handle the success of the win over Kentucky on Tuesday. The last time Ole Miss had success like this was against Alabama, and Ole Miss immediately went over and had a 3-game losing streak. It's going to be up to Ole Miss to try and maintain success. Ole Miss has LSU, they have South Carolina, they have a home game against Mississippi State, and then they're at Vanderbilt. 3 games on the road, but 4 games that Ole Miss likely should be favored in winning. And if Ole Miss plays defense, as Tim Thomas says, defense travels. So Ole Miss needs to be able to handle the success of the win over Kentucky on Tuesday. Number 2 is a program tweet on this show. Be competitive on the boards versus LSU. Whenever Ole Miss gets beat, whenever Ole Miss gets in trouble, it's because the other team mauls Ole Miss on the board. So if you can be competitive like you were the first time these two teams met, you have a chance to really stretch out and win the game. And another thing is just play a clean basketball game. Part of me is concerned about this because they only had 1 turnover against Kentucky. I think a sloppy game might be coming, especially with it being on the road, even though Kentucky and South Carolina, they're both kind of on quit watch at the moment. But Ole Miss needs to play a clean basketball game against LSU. LSU's hope in this game is fast break points. So if Ole Miss keeps it slow, keeps the tempo down, does what they do, play defense the way they play, and the athletes that they have, Ole Miss has 7 players with over 1,000 career points. Ole Miss has a chance to put LSU away at the PMAC. Players to watch in this game, Three players, same players as Kentucky. It's Sean Padula, it's Dre Davis, it's Matthew Murrell. Padula, just because the turnover thing, if he plays a clean game and distributes like he did against Kentucky, Ole Miss is dangerous. Him and Juju Murray as well. Dre Davis, whenever he plays well, Ole Miss wins. Ask Louisville, ask Kentucky, and ask Texas. Whenever he plays well, Ole Miss is a very hard team to beat. And then there's Matthew Murrell, who had 24 points in the game on Tuesday. The better Matthew Murrell gets for Ole Miss, the better Ole Miss is going to get as a team. And their whole ability to make a long run in the postseason tournaments, it all comes down to Matthew Murrell likely. So we'll see exactly how it looks. But Matthew Murrell, if he looks like he took a step against Kentucky, let's see if he can replicate that against LSU down at the PMAC. Final score in this game, I've got Ole Miss beating LSU 73-64 for their 7th conference win before a road game at South Carolina in the midweek. I think Ole Miss is just a little bit too much for the LSU Tigers. Now, it's the SEC. Weird things can happen on the road. We've seen that all over the place. But if Ole Miss goes and plays a relatively clean game and doesn't fall victim to the atmosphere or lack of atmosphere, depending on what it looks like down in Baton Rouge, I think Ole Miss should be able to win the game fairly easily. Big game. And Ole Miss is at the point of their season. This 4-game stretch that's going up right now is basically the difference between, hey, we just want to make it in the tournament and we want to make it in the tournament as a 3 or 4 seed. You got 4 games, and if Ole Miss can win those 4 games, it's going to be hard because 3 of them are on the road, and one of them is against your hated rival. But if you can win those 4 games, you're going to come out of it 10-4. And if Ole Miss comes out of it 10-4 with 6 games left to go, this basketball team has a chance to get a really, really low number whenever the brackets are announced on March Madness. Also, just to let you know, Locked On, in partnership with Amazon, is going to be doing a March Madness bracket show, I think nightly, both a men and a women's show. I will be on both of those if Ole Miss makes the tournament, along with all the Locked On hosts. Should be really cool indeed. Check that out as well. Last night was the SEC Squad show. Tomorrow morning, we are going to have the pregame show with Michael Katz, just like always, before the 8:30, Eastern tip-off in the basketball game. Should be a lot of fun. Can't wait for it. These reaction videos getting more and more traction every single time we do one, and that's pretty cool. So Ole Miss basketball is kind of where it needs to be. So thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast out there. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college football. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Hotty toddy, everyone. Remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow after the game.